welcome back to the Best Year of Your Life Summit. My name is Alexis Moore. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And I am delighted to be joined by Oren J. Sofer today. Just a few words about Oren. Oren teaches meditation and communication internationally. He holds a degree in comparative religion from Columbia University and is a certified trainer of nonviolent communication and a somatic experiencing practitioner for the healing of trauma. He is the author of several books, including the bestseller, Say What You Mean, A Mindful Approach to Nonviolent Communication, and his new book, Your Heart Was Made for This, Contemplative Practices to Meet a World in Crisis with Courage, Integrity, and Love. His teaching has reached people around the world through his online communication courses and guided meditation. So welcome, Oren. Really
Hi,
great to be here
Alexis.
with you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us today. So just to jump right in with the title of your last book, it has this phrase, contemplative practices, in the title. Could you share with us how you define contemplative practices?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's important for me to try to make contemplative practice accessible. It's not something esoteric or, just for people who are spiritual or religious. Contemplative practice is essentially anything that cultivates reflection, perspective, awareness, and that connects us with meaning, that connects us with our values or sense of purpose. And I really see contemplative practice as a kind of medicine for our times, for how stressed, overwhelmed we are, how distraught so many of our hearts are with everything happening in the world. And we hear a lot about meditation today, fortunately. I think it's a great asset. But contemplative practice is broader than meditation. So the analogy that I like to use is meditation is to contemplative practice as running is to exercise. So running is just one form of exercise. Not everybody likes to run. Running's not good for everybody, depending on your body. And in the same way, meditation isn't for everyone. But I think just as we all need to exercise, we all need to move, we all need some way to maintain our health, I think we all need some form of contemplative practice, something that helps give us perspective on our life or brings us back to what's most important to us. And what I love about contemplative practice is that it's creative. There are so many ways to step back, to get perspective, to strengthen our heart. So it includes things like storytelling and art and being in nature, or even really simple things, like having a cup of tea can be a contemplative practice. Folding the laundry can be a contemplative practice. It's not so much about what you're doing, but really the quality of intention and presence that you bring to the activity that makes it a contemplative practice.
Thank you for that. And in your book, you outline these core qualities that you name as qualities for training your heart, mind, and body to heal inwardly and guide your actions outwardly. So, are these qualities that can be developed through a variety of contemplative practices, as you just named, as opposed to just through meditation, for example, as you brought up?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I just find so amazing about being human is that we have this capacity to grow and develop in so many ways. I'm really fortunate to be a new parent. We have a toddler. We have another one on the way soon.
Congrats.
And one of the things that's been so neat about being a parent is just seeing this little human grow and learn. And one of the things that's amazing about little humans is that our brains are primed to learn any language. We can pick up on any of the world's languages. And I kind of think about our heart and mind in a similar way. Like we come into this world, each of us, with this whole range of capacities for really beautiful qualities, things like joy, generosity, gratitude, devotion, concentration, clarity. These are innate. Like I see it in my son over a year ago when he was just like 8 months old. He's sitting on the couch with me one day and he's nibbling on an apple. Um, and he offers it to me like, here, you eat it, because it's good. I want to share. And so that seed of generosity is there. And so the question is, just like we can learn any language, depending on what we're exposed to, what are we growing? What are we developing in our hearts and in our minds every day? So contemplative practice being so broad means that we can use the time that we've been granted every day to strengthen the beautiful aspects of our heart that we want to enjoy, share, and bring into the world. Yes, we can do it through meditation and various forms of what we might normally think of as contemplation. But the essence of it is first and foremost knowing that it's possible,
Right.
that our hearts and minds aren't etched in stone, that we can change and grow and learn,
Mm.
and then knowing what we want to cultivate. So choosing, like, what do I want to focus on? How do I want to live today? Every day we're setting down patterns and reinforcing certain ways of being. So, if we practice being stressed out and impatient and stingy, we're going to get really good at being stressed, impatient, and stingy. But if we practice, being centered, generous, patient, we get really good at that. And we can do that anywhere and everywhere. We can do it when we're sitting in traffic, when we're waiting for the bus, when we're waiting in line, when we're talking to our in-laws. There are countless moments where we can recollect what's important to us and remember our capacity for these qualities, and little by little start to strengthen them.
Reading a little bit about you and your background, then, and you teach meditation and you studied with some really big meditation teachers and influences here in the West, um, Joseph Goldstein, and also I saw Manindra.
Manindraji, yeah, he was one of my first teachers, and he was Joseph and Sharon's
Right.
teacher. I was very fortunate to meet him towards the end of his life and get to practice with him. Yeah,
That's beautiful. So this practice of meditation has had a huge influence on your life, but
absolutely.
Your book is not called "Your Heart Was Made for This" meditation practices to me. So what was important to you about broadening outside of just meditation as this place to develop these heart qualities?
Yeah, thanks. I love that question, Alexis. I think it's two things really. For as long as I can remember, sort of like since I've been an adult and been on this path, my main interest has been the question how. Like, how do we make this stuff real in our lives? I think that we all know what we want. One of my favorite activities to do with people when I teach is to invite them to take a few moments to get quiet, whether they're closing their eyes or feeling their breathing or looking out the window, just to sort of settle. And then to reflect on and connect with, like, why are you here today? So maybe even the people who've come to this summit, like, why did you sign up? What's important to you? What do you want to see in your life, in your
Right.
relationships, in your community, in our world? And it doesn't take long for people to identify a vision of what they want to grow in themselves or their world. So we have some sense of where we want to go. And then the question is, how do we bridge that gap? How do we get there? So that question of how do we make it real is really what's driving me in my life, and one of the things that inspires me every day. It's the reason I started meditating. It's the reason why 6 years into my meditation practice, when I was living at a meditation center and arguing with my coworkers about how to cut the broccoli or how long to steam the carrots, that I recognized I need some more tools on how to deal with other people. Because this meditation stuff is great, but if it's just about me sitting quietly and, feeling peaceful and calm or feeling
Mm.
loving wishes to everyone, but then I can't talk to my mom without getting angry or work something out with a coworker, then what good is it? And so I started practicing and learning nonviolent communication. It's why I trained with Peter Levine in trauma healing, when I recognized that, my capacity to actually really use the skills I was learning was being limited by the trauma that I had in my own life. So, how do we bridge that gap? That's really what inspires me. And we have to be creative to do that. We need to look carefully at who we are, what our strengths are, where we're falling down or getting stuck, and what skills or resources or support we can bring in to move in the direction we want to move in. So this is the main reason why I'm interested and wrote this whole book about contemplative practice broader than meditation. The other reason was becoming a parent, and all of a sudden my life is not my own. I have less time to meditate. I'm up in the middle of the night, and so I'm very fortunate that I was able to spend about 3 years in my own training, living at some of the Buddhist monasteries and learning more about the tradition that the Buddha created, which is really much broader than meditation practice. Meditation is sort of the jewel of the tradition that's come into Western society in the last 150 years or so. But the Buddha really taught a whole way of life. And it's hard to get a flavor of that from the modern meditation world. But if you spend time at traditional Buddhist
Mm.
monasteries, you see people working together, people coming to the monastery and bringing food and helping out and giving. You see the whole system that was developed and preserved for thousands of years. And that really broadened my perspective beyond just meditation to how we live. So I'll just add one more thing on this theme of contemplative practice, and then maybe we can get into some of the practices and tools. The foundation of contemplative practice is skill building. Like, we need inner resources to live in the world today, to realize our goals, to be the best people we can be. And so the skills that we cultivate in contemplative practice, things like concentration, clarity, balance, kindness, generosity, joy, these empower us and they make us more effective. They make us more effective in every aspect of our life, at home, at work, and as members of society.
That is beautiful. That is just, thank you so much for that. I've heard you describe how when you were living in a meditation center, then you still found yourself needing additional tools or resources to help you bridge the gap as to maybe how to bring some of that, what you were cultivating on the meditation cushion, into your relationships or more into the world. Then that led you to train with Dr. Levine and learn in nonviolent communication. So what I heard you share from there was about these skills that are being developed through the various practices to then, like, those are the things that help us to kind of bridge this gap. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. They help us bridge the gap, and they're one of the ways to just make this stuff real, is to use the time we have every day to be growing in these different areas.
I would love to talk about some of these skills that you named that we can develop through the contemplative practices.
Mhm.
And you talk about those in your book, Your Heart Was Made for This. So these various skills of attention, aspiration, and could you share what those skills are with us? I think there's 6 of them.
Sure. Well, I mean, the book covers 26 qualities. There's this whole range, and there's even more, right? You only have so much space in the book. I chose 26 because I wanted people to have a sort of roadmap for a whole year. If you devote 2 weeks to each quality, you get a whole year of learning and growth and training. And so it is, as you said, it's everything from things that we might more ordinarily associate with meditation practice. And that's the first part of the book: attention, aspiration, our sense of vision, what's important to us, what we want, um, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. But it's also other qualities like I've mentioned joy and gratitude and generosity, compassion, equanimity,
Right.
even things like play, which is really essential part of the way that we learn and feel alive in life, or the relationship between energy and rest, which I know is one of the things that we wanted to talk about. I think it's important too, like as we sort of move into this part of the conversation where we're going to look at like, okay, which skills, how do we cultivate them, to just mention briefly the prevalence of trauma in our world, and kind of a few key tips for folks who were interested in learning more about contemplative practice to make sure they're starting off on the right foot.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so, I think many people are aware of the prevalence of trauma in our world today for a variety of reasons. And even if you're one of the lucky few who somehow was spared from, some form of trauma growing up, whether some sort of acute event trauma or more complicated developmental trauma, or the trauma of poverty, violence, racism, all of these different forces that shape our lives, using these principles really helps set us up for learning in a way that's the most powerful and really easy and enjoyable. So there are three main principles that I recommend folks learn about and practice in both in contemplative practice, but really kind of in anything that you want to learn. And so the first is starting from a place of relative safety and relaxation. How we begin something really matters. And it really sets the course or the arc of where we're going to go. So just attending to where we're starting from, and as much as possible, trying to start from a place of wholeness. One of the main tools for this is to do something called orienting, which is just kind of a really fancy way of saying, just letting your body know where you are and that you're safe. So all mammals do this. It just involves kind of looking around, taking in your surroundings, but using your eyes, your head, and your neck. All of the nerves that direct the muscles of the eyes, the head, and the neck are connected to the ventral vagus nerve, which helps to regulate the body. So if you watch like deer or other prey in the wild, you'll see them periodically just kind of do that. And they're orienting, they're checking to make sure we're safe. So when we begin something, just trying to establish that sense of like, I'm here, I'm okay, I know where I am, not as a thought, but as a felt experience in the body. This is the first principle. Pay attention to how you're starting, play to your strength, and try to start from a place of being relaxed, connected, at ease as much as possible. And orienting can help us do that. The next principle is when you're working with things that are challenging, which is inevitable in any area of life, whatever you're doing, start small. So we learn best when we're challenged a little bit, but not too much. Right? If we're not challenged at all, we're just comfortable, we don't learn. But if we're overwhelmed, we also don't learn. We just go into our defense mechanisms. So this is called titrating in trauma healing. It means taking a little bit at a time. So just when you're working with something difficult, stretch into it a little bit at a time. And then the last principle is also around working with challenges, and that is to do something called pendulating, just like a pendulum, swinging back and forth. And this is moving naturally, kind of rhythmically back and forth between whatever it is that is difficult with something that feels more supportive, more healing, reassuring. And this is usually some kind of a resource, which could be thinking of a good friend, a place in nature, holding your hand on your heart, or clasping your hands together, or holding a smooth stone, just something that helps us feel a little bit better. And that rhythm of moving back and forth helps our nervous system to process things and integrate them. So these three principles of paying attention to how you're beginning, titrate, start small, and then pendulate, move back and forth, can help us navigate the terrain as we're developing the skills we need to survive and thrive in our world.
But yeah, this is so beautiful. I'm so glad that you're offering this to folks. I'm just so glad that you're offering this to folks, and I'd love to go into maybe like an example, like maybe if there's an example from parenting, because you mentioned, you know, as you became a parent, it's like, oh, I don't have as much time for meditation, so my practice is looking differently. And is there an example that comes to mind for you of how these three principles would show up in like an average day as a parent, where there's, I want to
Yeah.
hand it to you.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks. I love that you invite that because it's one of, I'm great about talking about things theoretically
Yeah.
and we learn through stories. So I appreciate the invitation to share a story. So one would be like, orient, right? Where are you starting from? So I try as much as possible, like at the beginning of the day, before our son wakes up, or like if I'm going to pick him up at daycare, you know, to take a moment to pay attention to how I am and
Mm,
what am I bringing into the space, right? Like if I've had a stressful day at work, if my wife and I had an argument, if I'm stressed out about something that's happening in the world,
right.
can I take that moment I need to, as much as possible, reset, release it, and really just come back to my values and what I want to bring to my son? I want to be fully present. I want him to experience me in a way where he feels relaxed, that my
Mm,
presence in his life can be something that feels grounding and reassuring rather than stressed and anxious. And I get stressed and I get anxious. So as much as possible, I want to start off coming from that good place. So just taking a moment to pause would be one, and coming back to my intentions, taking a deep breath if I need to, is a way that I do that. Titrating. So if he's going through one of his he's 2 years old now, so he is exploring the challenges of not getting what he wants and how to respond to that, throwing himself on the ground, kicking and screaming and crying. He generally has a really good disposition, but he also experiences that. So that can be overwhelming, that can be activating for my nervous system. So how do I engage with that, right? So titrating would be like not trying to fix the whole problem right at once, not try, but just like, okay, take a step back inside, take a breath. What's one little thing I can do
oh,
right now?
wow.
Just to be able to reflect back to him like, wow, really big feelings, huh, bud? You know, just a
Right.
little bit. And then the pendulating, right? That might be like, okay, I'm starting to lose it, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm at the edge of my capacity now. So what do I need to do in order to sort of try to come back into balance? And that might be, if my wife's around, that might be saying, sweetie, I need some help, right? Or it might be sometimes saying to my son, like, I need a break right now. I'm going to step away and come right back. I'm still here with you,
Wow.
right? Or even like when he was younger, if he was, it's like, up at 2 in the morning, he's screaming and crying and can't settle, and I'm at the end of my limit, right? It's like, put him down in the crib and walk out of the room. And so
Okay.
the pendulating is move to something else that's going to be settling or reassuring. So I walk out of the room, I take a few deep breaths, you know, I think about my dad who passed a couple years ago and like how much he loved our son or something that's going to help me
Mhm.
recharge and resource and
Whoa.
then come back to the situation with a little bit more bandwidth.
Wow. And so, is this where some of the creativity comes in? Because I heard you describing, for instance, in the second step, then it's like, was that the titrating?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh, maybe I can go and tag my wife in. maybe I can tell my son I need a break and step away. So it was like I heard like, okay, so there's options, which would take, it seems, some reflection time to
Hmm.
be able to have an understanding of what some of those options could be in
Yeah.
that moment. And then the pendulum piece too. Going out and then reflecting on your father or grandfather's relationship with your son. Like that's also something that would require some reflection. That doesn't sound like maybe that would be the first place our mind would go when we're at
Yeah.
our limit would go there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, what do you think about that? I'm thinking about how the creativity is coming in here. Am I on the right track?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a common question because life is unpredictable and chaotic, and things aren't often presented to us in a neat and tidy way, right? It's not like now you're going to experience something difficult, so please prepare yourself. And it's one of my meditation teachers used to say, the analogy he used just about meditating in general. He said, meditating is like trying to put up a tent in a hurricane.
Mm,
It's like our minds are nuts. There's so many things going on inside, and it's overwhelming, and it's busy, and we're reacting, and we're remembering, and we're planning, and to just try to get one moment of peace and feel our breath is hard. And life is like that a lot of the time. John Kabat-Zinn has that wonderful title to his book, The Full Catastrophe. So the there's a kind of reciprocal relationship between two ways of practicing here.
mm,
Um, One is preparing. And this is why
mm,
formal meditation exercises or other kinds of contemplative practice, like walking, um, or drinking tea mindfully, or engaging in conversation with presence and intention, why these are so important is because they train us to learn more about our minds, our hearts, and how to navigate difficulties. We need training. We need skills for those difficult moments. So the time to get your rain gear is not in the middle of the storm. Right?
mm,
You want to leave the house, you want to check the weather, bring an umbrella, bring some rain gear. You want to have a sense of what's coming and be prepared. So the preparation is what we're doing and how we're living every day. Are we taking time to take care of our heart and mind and to build the capacities and resources that we need? We need a way of doing this. It doesn't just happen by itself. It won't happen by itself if you don't set an intention and follow through. If we don't do that, if we don't make an effort to shape our hearts and our minds and our inner life in a way that's consistent with our vision for
mm,
who we are and what we want to bring to the world, guess what? The world is going to do it for you.
mhm,
And what's the world? The world is the forces of greed, consumption, capitalism. That's what's going to shape us is social media and television and the media, and we're just pulled along. So we
mhm,
need we need to train ourselves and prepare. And then there's life. Then there's the rest of what happens, and which is just playing in the game and doing the best we can. And we draw on the skills and preparation we have, and we can be creative.
okay,
We just make it up as we go and practice bringing as much patience, forgiveness, and grace to ourselves and others, knowing that we're all doing the best we can.
mm. And that actually makes so much sense. Like I'm going back to this example with your son, and I'm thinking about your preparation, and you didn't describe, okay, I rushed out of bed and then I went to his room and I had to get him up and get him breakfast and everything. You first took a moment with yourself and a breath and reflecting on your values and how you want to meet him. So um, even
Yeah,
just that step one, I can see how, okay, as your parent, so this is something that's going to be repeated. It's going to be it's like a daily
right.
opportunity.
Right.
And then to start small. Oh my gosh. It wasn't that if your son is having a tantrum, then it's like, okay, I have to stop it and I have to be able to like perfectly comfort him and, get him to stop crying and be calm. It's like
Yeah.
you get to just do a little bit of a time, like, oh wow, having some just compassion. So
Yeah.
the reason this is really like landing, I can really see how this is making sense because this is like a small example, but then go out into like if it's a business meeting and it's like you already have some of that practice. So maybe you're going to go into a business meeting. Maybe there would be some topic that might be hard to address or something, but like having that already in place and having some of those skills that you were building from this completely separate and seemingly unrelated
Yeah.
personal experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to like keep filling in more detail and example, so I remember one particular phase when he was still a newborn. And, my wife and I are incredibly sleep deprived and just really kind of at the end of my rope um, for a while. And coming to a place inside where I recognized, like I really need to be more patient. I was at the end of my rope and I would get angry. I would get angry with this little helpless baby, who was crying and screaming. And it's like, this is not helpful. I don't want to bring this energy, to his experience. It's hard for me and for my wife. Like I really need to practice being more patient. And so the titrating skill, this is something we practice when we can control the circumstances. So, for example, like in meditation, or if you're reflecting on something challenging, titrating would be not diving into the middle of it, some argument you have with a coworker and you're really, you know, tied up in knots around it. It's just taking a little bit of it. So you just like think of the person's image and see what happens and you feel what comes up inside. And then you breathe and let that energy dissipate and come back to something that feels supportive. And then you think about one thing they said, and then you take a break. So there's the titrating is just one thing, and then the pendulating is the moving away from it. So you develop that skill in your nervous system when you can, learning how to do it. And then in the moment, so, it's the middle of the night, my son's screaming and crying. I feel that wave of anger coming up. And then it's just saying to myself, just remembering that intention and that potential to be patient, just saying like patience, patience. And then just like something settling, something letting go, like bringing to bear everything that I've learned about patience in my life. That patience doesn't mean gritting your teeth and resisting until it's over. That's called resisting. Patience is letting go. Patience is widening. It's getting bigger. It's feeling more space. It's aligning with the flow of the way things are. And so, in that one word, I'm saying to myself, patience, I'm like remembering all that I know in my being about how to be patient. And then just one moment at a time. Like that's all we can do is to just be patient for this moment. And then again for this moment. And then that's how it grows. That's how we get stronger in these areas.
Okay. And so I want to go back to what you were saying earlier on in the conversation about talking about some tools and practices around this.
I'll share just kind of one of the core practices that I talk about in the book, which is based on Rick Hanson's work, Taking in the Good. And it really what I love about it is it's short, it's portable, and it can be applied to anything. So any quality that you want to cultivate, any resource. So this could be joy, it could be generosity, it could be patience, it could be resolve, that sense of determination, it could be playfulness.
Got it.
So any quality, what you want to do is you want to begin to, first you want to learn as much as you can about it, to really just understand like, what is this quality? How do I understand it? Where does it show up? And then you want to start to pay attention to it. Look for it in your life. Yeah.
And just for folks listening, when you say learn as much as you can about it, you're talking about, for instance, generosity or joy or
Yeah.
playfulness. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're
Yeah.
learning about it, and then please continue from there. Thank you for.
Yeah. So let's take something like joy. Like,
Yeah.
what does joy really mean? Like,
Right.
does joy just mean being happy all of the time? I don't think so, right? To come to a deeper understanding of what this particular quality or resource or capacity is that you want to cultivate,
Right.
so that you have some understanding of it, not just in a superficial way. Right? So, I mean, this is just to go back to my book. I mean, like each chapter kind of unpacks a quality and provides something to chew on about it to try to arrive at a deeper understanding of what it is. Then you want to pay attention for moments in your life where it's naturally occurring. You don't need to create these moments, they're there. Look for a moment of joy. When is there even the smallest moment of joy? You see a hummingbird, and there's just this kind of momentary delight in being alive. Wow. Yeah. Or somebody does something that just really, really fills you inside. It's like, oh, wow. Instead of that experience just kind of passing, and it's nice, but then we move on, we really notice it. So that's the first step, is to notice it. And then the next step is to linger there, to try to really let it in, to notice how you feel, to enjoy and savor it. For the guidance from the neuroscience is at least 20 seconds to actually see neurological changes.
Mm.
So, for example, one of the things we're talking about parenting a lot for some reason on our conversation, which is fine. But one of the things, one of the ways I'm cultivating joy these days, one of the games my son likes to play right now, is we have this big stability ball in our living room, and I pin it against the couch with my knees so it's not moving around. And he stands on top, and I hold his hands, and he jumps up and down and up and down. We call it boinga, boinga, boinga. So he's jumping, and he's just delighted, just filled with glee. And so I get to witness this, and I get to receive that joy and let it fill me. And so to really notice the expression on his face, to see his joy, and then to feel it in my own body and let it nourish me. Yeah. And so this is one way of developing these qualities in our life. And then I'll go on to add something else that I know we had corresponded about talking about. It's like that joy then becomes a resource for being with pain and suffering and grief. Like, there's so much violence in our world right now in different areas. There's, so much loss, species loss, ecosystems. How do we hold that? How do we even take it in? We can't actually, in a skillful way, without just going into despair or overwhelm or freezing, if we don't have something to buoy us. So the joy, it's not just about like la-di-da, everything's great, but this is actually strengthening. This is actually creating the context for me to be an awake, empowered individual in a community, in a world that needs people who have the resilience to stay alert and bear witness and engage with what's happening. We can't do that if we're not nourishing ourselves. So my approach, and which is really a trauma-informed approach in this particular book and the way I'm teaching right now, is to really focus on helping people to nourish themselves, not because we're trying to block things out or avoid them or pretend they're not happening, but because without a way to come to a sense of balance and feeling at least a little bit resourced, it's difficult, if not impossible, to open to everything else that's happening.
Right. And, this is really, I hope this can be really helpful to folks, because we started off the conversation talking about bridging the gap. And, okay, people may be relating to understanding what they want. Oh, I want more peace in my life. I want more, peace in my life. And then, but how do I bridge the gap to actually get there? And so, like, what are the actual, what does peace consist of? And then, talking about patience, talking about joy, and then you really breaking down these um, places in life that are happening moment to moment where we have the opportunity to tune into how we're developing that quality. And I'm hearing the recognition that that quality is being developed. So
Yeah.
staying on the parenting train, which is the train that we're on for this conversation, then just I'm thinking about when you mentioned like waking up in the middle of the night and then saying patience. So is that the recognition right there? Like, and this is my moment where I'm actually growing this quality.
It's a little different.
Okay.
It's so in that moment, it's more like it is a moment where I'm growing patience,
Uh-huh.
but that's not a moment of resource of sort of building the inner well. So a moment of building the inner well would be, um, I'm having a good day, I feel relaxed, and I'm waiting in line. And ordinarily, when I'd be like looking at my clock and be like, come on, why is this checkout person so slow? I'm like, oh wow, I feel kind of relaxed and patient. That's nice. I'm going to notice that this is what patience feels like. This is what not feeling that contraction and pressure and feeling like I'm trying to control things and make it work and push the river. Oh, and I'm going to really notice how patience feels and what it's like and take this kind of like 3D mental Polaroid of patience that's just occurring spontaneously. I'm not having to work for it. It's here. Yeah. And
Mm,
then when I don't have patience
right.
and I want to pull my hair out and I remind myself, like for me, that's the word patience. For someone else, it might be seeing the image of a great redwood, or it might be remembering their grandmother, or it might be, a memory of sitting by a river, like whatever it is that brings you back there. I'm saying that word and I'm touching into the felt memory that I've already established and created
Ooh, yeah.
of patience. That makes more sense, the connection there?
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense. And I hope this can just be really helpful for folks because to me the way that you're describing it, it feels very accessible. And what I just love about that is I think I've certainly had the experience where it's like life gets busy and I'm I start to have a little bit less energy and then I'm waking up late and I'm not doing the morning meditation
Yeah.
um and then I get into that mindset where throughout the day I might feel a little crazy. And then I'll shoot that second arrow and be like, well, this is because, I didn't do the meditation this morning and it's kind of like on me. It's so easy for that to kick off. Um, and so what you're describing is sounds like, wait a second. Okay, there's a lot of accessible ways to bridge this gap of
Yeah.
cultivating the peace and these things that we want for ourselves that are not only happening in one specific context.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you feel is important to bring into this conversation or to leave folks with on this whole arena of contemplative practice?
Sure. Yeah. I think I would want to just emphasize again that, our hearts and minds are not fixed.
Mhm.
We can and do change and learn and grow. And so to really take in this fact that every day we're practicing something. And every day we can grow stronger, more resilient, more flexible if we know how to train the heart and mind. And that as we do that, it positions us to contribute to our world and to create a different world for the future. One of the things I
Mhm.
have found myself saying a lot in the last year is that there's too much pain and suffering in our world for us to do everything, for any of us to try to do everything. But that also means there's too much pain and suffering to not do anything.
Mm.
So I really encourage people to listen and listen for what's yours to do. There's so many ways to be involved in creating a different future, and the future's not written. No matter what anyone tells you, it's not written. It hasn't come yet. The future is created by what all of us say and do today, and then again today, and then again today. So focusing on what we can do is empowering. It reduces anxiety, it creates energy, it inspires others, and it supports momentum towards realizing our goals individually and collectively. So what's yours to do? What do you feel called to do? Not what someone else thinks you should do, not what you read in a book or an article somewhere, not what you heard on this summit, but what actually makes your heart come alive that you feel called to do to make the world a better place, to live the life that you want to live and give and contribute to others. And then do that. Find ways to do it. Find others who are doing it and do it together.
That's beautiful. And Oren, is there maybe one practice or tip that you can leave listeners with to help them explore those questions that you just shared?
Sure. Well, I'll offer two because I thought you were going to ask a different question, which I think is also fun to talk about. And one is just like, what's just one thing you can do in general every day, just like from our whole conversation.
Totally.
And I would say take 30 seconds, a minute every morning to just quiet yourself and choose consciously, how do you want to live today? What's important to you? And then at the end of the day, before you go to bed, as you're lying down, reflect back on the day and just look for the moments where you remembered. And even if there were none, it still matters. You're still moving in the right direction. And do that every day. Do it for a week and then reevaluate. And then, yeah, as far as this listening, do whatever helps you to get quiet inside. For some of us, it's being alone. For others, it's being in nature. For some, it's being in water or listening to music or being with somebody else. But do create the conditions for you to get quiet inside. And then ask the question and just listen. What's mine to do? What do I feel called to do? Ask that question and then just listen. You don't have to figure it out. And the answer doesn't need to make sense right away. But just listen to what comes, images, memories, thoughts. And if it's not clear right away, do it again the next day and do it again the next day. And do that periodically until it becomes clearer and clearer. And then trust that. Follow it.
Thank you so much, Oren. This has been incredibly thought-provoking and incredibly helpful. And thank you so much for just coming and sharing your wisdom with us today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, really, really happy to have the opportunity to connect and share. And thank you so much for having me and sharing the conversation.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. And I want to also, really quick, how can people find out more about you and your work, Oren?
Sure. The best way to connect and find out about my work more is probably through my website, orenjsofer.com. You can learn more about my online training courses in contemplative practice and mindful communication. I have a newsletter. When you sign up, you get some free guided meditations. I don't send too many emails. And then I'm also on social media a little bit at orenjsofer.
That's right. Make sure you go check out Oren's YouTube as well. He has some wonderful talks and guided meditations there. So make sure to go check that out. And thanks again so much, Oren. It's been a joy.
Likewise. Thanks, Alexis.